Happy Friday the 13th to all you ghouls and geists. It's your friendly neighborhood dork for short here, and I have a very wonderful announcement to make. You heard it right. We are in fact a Duskmourn ambassador for Magic the Gathering. When Wizards of the Coast reached out to me to be a part of this wonderful program, I was beyond stoked to be a part of it. I mean, I've been in love with horror for just about all my life. The genre has been pivotal in shaping my life, and I'm so thankful to be able to share this with you. One of my earliest memories of the genre was being told at a young age not to turn around to watch the TV, and of course my rebellious nature gave in, and as I looked behind me was met with the consuming fright of millions upon millions of spiders consuming a grown man. Obviously I was met with an initial impact of fear, but there was almost a sort of curiosity even at my young age that I felt while watching such a grotesque scene. As I began to grow older, it was my grandmother that continued to kindle my love of the horror genre, introducing me to a familiar childhood horror author and novel series that might be a bit reminiscent to the art that you see on some of these cards. This love for the genre would continue onward even into high school, where I would oftentimes find myself, let's just say, missing classes to watch different horror movies that interested me. And I mean, how can I not love them? Schlocky sequels, slashers, I mean, even just a bunch of gremlins running around would entertain me. I really did fall in love with the genre and wanted to continue to share that love with anyone I could talk to. After high school, I was so inspired by the genre that I took myself and a bunch of buddies to make our own independent horror films. They were ideas such as the monotony of a part-time job, a sentient parasitic beard, and a local folklore legend that we came up with about our small town. While I would primarily write and direct the films, I would have buddies shoot them, make music for them, act in them, and very generously help me come up with the gallons of fake blood that went into them. And although my projects never really made it to, the silver screen, I still wanted to support that industry, working alongside iconic B-movie and horror directors to get their films a bit more recognition, and of course independent filmmakers that wanted to share their visions on the screens I could provide. The mentality I had working with these nonprofits to showcase these movies was the idea of where would I wanted my films to be if I ever got them off the ground, and what venues would I be able to host people in that would best suit everyone's needs. And that leads us to now, a journey literal decades in the making, now as a Duskmourn ambassador for Magic the Gathering, and I'm beyond stoked to be able to share this journey with all of you. And of course, share my own thoughts on the set. It is such a beautifully grotesque love letter to the genre that I fell in love with at an early age, and it actually inspired the project that I'm going to share with y'all today. I took it upon myself, even before finding out I would be an ambassador, to brew up a deck list for every single legendary creature within the set. And honestly, I'm here to share them all with you. Now, with that being said, it's not comprehensive. I'm not going to go off on a deck list for every single one of these legendary creatures, but I can at least showcase some cool interactions, synergies, and cards that I thought would be enjoyable with all of you. So dim the lights, pop some corn, and strap in, because brewers beware, you're in for a scare. Starting off in white, we have the Wandering Rescuer, a 5-mana 3/4 human samurai noble with flash. She also has Convoke, meaning your creatures can help cast a spell. Each creature you tap while casting a spell pays for either 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. She has Double Strike, and other tap creatures you control have hexproof. The first thing that came to mind when brewing this commander was the new survival mechanic, a sort of mechanic that rewards you for allowing your creatures to survive the night. For instance, Reluctant Role Model states at the beginning of your second main phase, if Reluctant Role Model is tapped, put a flying lifelink or 1/1 counter on it. We want to have non-combat ways of protecting our creatures, so the first thing that came to mind was by using vehicles. By using vehicles, we find ways of avoiding combat entirely, but also having some form of interaction on the battlefield. One of the standout cards for this list is actually Wand of the World Soul, which for 2 colors and a white is an artifact that, although it enters the battlefield taps, also lets you tap it and have the next spell you cast this turn have Convoke. Now, although our tapped creatures have hexproof, we're not the most safe if they're all tapped. That's why we need to run cards like Drumbellor, who allow us to untap all creatures we control during each other player's untap step. Finally, in a deck full of Convoke cards and allowing us to untap during each other opponent's untap step, we play cards like Veldican Orrery that lets us cast our non-land cards as though they had flash. All in all, this deck is an absolute nightmare for spot removal, but an absolute dream for whoever's piloting it. Toby Beastie Befriender is a 1/1 human wizard for 2 and a white. When Toby Beastie Befriender enters, create a 4/4 white beast creature token with this creature can attack or block alone. As long as you control 4 or more creature tokens you control are flying. This one's a bit more self-explanatory. It's a standalone creature token deck, so you just kind of pick your favorite creature producers. For instance, I choose Clownin' Around. It's Fun. It's something that I would imagine a kid with an imaginary friend might enjoy. On top of that, we want to be able to generate a lot of tokens fast. That's why a personal pick of mine is a card like Secure the Waste. But we also have to make sure that our tokens aren't too small, which is why we run Anthem effects such as Intangible Virtue and Cathar's Crusade. Believe me when I say getting wins with a deck like this will be far from imaginary. The Mind Skinner is a 3 blue mana legendary enchantment creature nightmare. It's a 10/1 that can't be blocked, and if a source you control will deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. Although it's unlikely you'll be winning with commander damage anytime soon, the alternative is equally as disgusting. Filling your deck with cards like Fraying Sanity and Mindcrank only for your opponents to fill their graveyards twice as fast is nothing more than satisfying. You'll be able to cast cards like Hullbreaker Horror using only mana derived from your opponent's tears. Valgavoth Terror Eater is a flying lifelink 9/9 Elder Demon for 6 colorless and 3 black. Valgavoth also has a ward where your opponent has to sacrifice 3 non-land permanents to even target Valgavoth. If a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. For our opponents, we want to remind them that nowhere is safe. Not their hands, libraries, graveyards, anywhere. This style of deck, you want to feel like you are embodying the true villain of Duskmourn. Norrin Swift Survivalist is a 2/1 human coward for just 1 red mana. Norrin Swift Survivalist can't block, and whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. Initially, I was at a loss for poor Norrin. I always thought that he was going to be the same coward that we met when we first saw him. But then I did some thinking, and oftentimes in these horror movies, the most unexpected hero survives till the end. They rise up, confront their fears, grab that chainsaw, and beat the rest of the table. That's right, for this style of deck, we want to go full Voltron. Pump up our creatures, swing at our opponents, and show them that we are no longer afraid of them. Say its name and it appears. I believe in Altanak, the Thrice Called, a 9/9 insect beast for 5 colorless and 2 green. It has trample, and whenever Altanak, the Thrice Called, becomes a target of spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. It also has an ability where if you pay a colorless and a green and discard it, you return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Admittedly, you're probably not using that discard ability too much with this being your commander, and you're definitely not running more than 1 copy of Say Its Name in a singleton format. But Dork, which singleton format? Are we just running it in commander? Kind of. Noticing that this creature is actually an uncommon, I opted to go with a PDH route, a Pauper Commander route of course. The green commons that we make the most use out of are of course the ramp pieces that we have access to, and fog effects to buy us time so we can cheat out such a large creature. Kona Rescue Beastie is a 4/3 beast survivor for 3 colorless and a green. She says at the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona Rescue Beastie is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. The Brewing inspiration is very similar to what we did for the Wandering Rescuer, but unlike that deck, we get to utilize such mana accelerant cards like Cryptolith, to that way use Kona to tap for mana and cheat out more permanents. A personal favorite of mine that I would like to cheat out with Kona would have to be Galta Stampede Tyrant. I mean, could you imagine what other giant threats you could put on the battlefield with that? Tyvar the Pummeler is a 3/3 elf warrior for 1 and 2 green mana. Tyvar reads, tap another untapped creature you control. Tyvar the Pummeler gains indestructible and end a turn. Tap it. For 3 colorless and 2 green, creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. For this deck, we defeat our opponents with the powers of math! Or in this case, just making our creatures very, very large. Besides, math is for blockers anyway. Amanatu Veil Piercer is a 2/4 human wizard for 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 2. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest on the top of your library in any order. Each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. You may cast a card for its Miracle cost when you draw it if it's the first card you draw this turn. Amanatu's ability is very powerful, allowing for us to cheat out expensive enchantments such as Omniscience or one with the Multiverse. Typically, expensive enchantments are made that mana cost for a reason, and usually ramping those out sooner than they're expected to be out can be dangerous for the rest of the table. Arabella Abandoned Doll is a 1/3 toy. for 1 red and 1 white. Whenever our Bella Abandoned Doll attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. Although maybe not a immediately powerful ability at first glance, this card looks incredible for PDH, filling it with aggressive low-to-the-ground cards that soon pile on damage quick while also gaining you life with your commander. Kian Corrupted Memory is a 2/2 illusion for 2 colorless, a green, and a blue. As long as Kian's power is even, you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. As long as Kian's power is odd, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash. Whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on Kian. With how often you're casting different types of spells, a card like Inexorable Tide would really help you control what the power and toughness of Kian would be at a given point in time. Additionally, I feel like cards similar to Chasm Skulker would definitely help out in the 99 of this deck. The Lord of Pain is a 5/5 human assassin with menace. It costs 3 generic, a black and a red, and it reads, your opponents can't gain life, and whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. Immediately, the Lord of Pain reminds me of cards like Karavak the Merciless, and of course Vial Smasher, that will continue to deal damage to your opponents based on you casting spells. Marina Vendril is a 3/5 human warlock for Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, and green. When Marina Vendril enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. In addition to this, you can tap her to lock or unlock a door of target room you control, activate only as a sorcery. Although Marina would be a powerful commander for just about any Enchantress style strategy, we'd be missing the point if we didn't acknowledge the fact that she is the quintessential room commander. Nashi's Searcher in the Dark is a 2/2 rat ninja wizard for a blue and a black. Nashi has Menace, and whenever Nashi Searcher in the Dark deals combat damage to a player, you mill that many cards. You may put any number of legendary and or enchantment cards from among them into your hand. If you put no cards in your hand this way, put a 1/1 counter on Nashi. Besides the importance of course pumping Nashi and making him big enough to connect and fill our bin fast, we also want to make sure that we have solid targets to bring back and different ways to bring them back outside of our commander. Luckily for us, Duskmourn has provided us with a plethora of different pieces we can use to bring things back from the bin or help fill it up even faster. Nico Light of Hope is a 3/4 human wizard for 2, 1 white, and a blue. When Nico Light of Hope enters, create 2 shard tokens. They're enchantments with, if you pay 2 generic and sack the enchantment, you scry 1, then draw a card. More importantly, if you tap for 2 generic and tap Nico, exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Essentially, we want to find different ways of producing many different shard tokens. As of the recording of this video, there are a whopping 2 cards that do it, and I'll give you a hint. They're both Nico. With that being said, there are more than enough ways to flicker Nico, bring them back, and give us even more shard tokens. And what do we turn shard tokens into, you may ask? Well, you tell me. The Jolly Balloon Man is a 1/4 human clown for 1, 1 red, and 1 white. It has haste, and if you pay 1 generic and tap it, you create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, except the 1/1 red balloon creature in addition to its other types, and it has flying and haste. You sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step, and you can only activate it as a sorcery. With that being said, there's nothing funny about this card. It's actually surprisingly strong, with different types of combo potential and value engines centered around producing tokens. Okay, I will admit, there is something morbidly funny about seeing the Jolly Balloon Man blowing up human heads as his own personal balloon animals. Speaking of combo potential, the Master of Keys is a 3/3 flying horror for X, a white, a blue, and a black. When the Master of Keys enters, put X 1/1 counters on it and mill twice X cards. Each enchantment card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. You may cast cards from your graveyard for their escape cost. This is the type of commander that I foresee a lot of people winning with cards like Doomsday, or more recently Doomsday Excruciator, and then pairing those cards up with infamous cards like Thassa's Oracle or Jace Wielder of Mysteries. The Swarm Weaver is a 2/3 scarecrow for 2 generic, a black, and a green. When the Swarm Weaver enters, create 2 1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying. Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. Now, I'm no stranger to brewing up Delirium-centered insect decks, and the Swarm Weaver is a welcome addition to those types of strategies. I am beyond thrilled to see the amount of support that we're getting for both spiders and insects alike. I, for one, think it's about time that these 8-legged freaks got the love that they deserved. Valgavoth returns, but this time with red, as Valgavoth Harrower of Souls. Valgavoth Harrower of Souls is a 4/4 flying elder demon for 2, a black and a red. It has ward for paying 2 life, and whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, you put a 1/1 counter on Valgavoth Harrower of Souls and draw a card. As stated from the precons, this is the group slug list, where you're trying to punish your opponents on their turns by doing the simplest actions such as drawing cards or even just being part of their upkeep. Then, you reap the rewards by drawing cards, making your commander bigger, and beating them in the face on your coming turn. Victor Valgavoth Seneskull is a 3/3 human warlock for a generic, a white, and a black. He has Eerie, so whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2 if this is the first time this ability is resolved this turn. If it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. If it's the third time, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I think it's oddly charming to be able to play punishing effects for discarding, like Liliana's Caress and Megrim, while also triggering Eerie for Victor. Look at it this way, the creature cards don't even have to be your own. It's from any graveyard, so as long as you're consistently making your opponent's discard cards, you'll have plenty of different targets to reanimate with that ability alone, not to mention different animate dead effects that auras can possess. Winter Cynical Opportunist is a 2/5 human warlock with Death Touch for 2 generic, a black, and a green. Whenever Winter attacks, mill 3 cards. Winter also has Delirium, so at the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them, and if you do, you put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with Finality counter on it. Although once that permanent is gone with that Finality counter, it's basically gone forever, going to exile, there's a lot of powerful plays you can get in a Delirium style deck. Unlike the previous one, which was more centered around bugs and insects, we'd rather take this one and go through the variety of different card types and overlap that will reward us for having them in the bin, but then bringing them back later. Admittedly, although I do like Winter as a character, I'm not particularly fond of this card. I actually prefer the other version of Winter. Winter Misanthropic Guide is a 3/4 human warlock for a generic, a black, a red, and a green. Winter has Ward too, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards. Winter also has Delirium, so as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those card types. For this style of deck, I not only wanted cards that would punish my opponents for drawing cards, but also would try to restrict and limit their hand size as much as possible. Zamone All Questioning is a 1/1 human wizard for a generic, a green, and a blue. At the beginning of your end step, if a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn, and you control a prime number of lands, create Primo, the Invisible, a legendary 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, then put that many 1/1 counters on it. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, and 31 are prime numbers. With that being said, we try to play as many lands as we possibly can while still fitting around the parameters of being a prime number, but admittedly, some rules are meant to be broken. That's why we're running the signature artifact of the deck, Mirror Box. It's a 3-mana artifact that reads, the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control, and each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1. Admittedly, the third line doesn't really matter too much when we're just trying to populate a bunch of fractals, but that first 2 clauses are huge for this style of deck. Zamone also has a commander card for the pre-constructed decks. Zamone Mystery Unraveler, a 3/3 human wizard for 2 generic, a green, and a blue. She has landfall, so whenever a land you control enters, manifest dread if this is the first time this ability is resolved this turn. Otherwise, you may turn a permanent you control face up. To manifest dread, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, and the other into your graveyard. Turn it face up at any time for its mana cost if it's a creature. This premise is extremely direct and to the point, and being that it's one of the pre-constructed decks, is pretty straightforward. Jam your deck full of morphs, flip them face up, beat your opponent, profit. And last but certainly not least, this delightfully adorable little devil of a card, Marvin Murderous Mimic, a 2/2 toy for 2 generic mana. He's a legendary artifact creature that reads, Marvin Murderous Mimic has all activate abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature. Although this card is limited to only using other colorless cards in the 99, you have plenty of different activate abilities to choose from for Marvin to share and enjoy. And there you have it, ghouls and goths, every single legendary creature in Duskmourn with a corresponding deck idea paired with them. Yes, there will be deck lists on the way. If you want to check those out, those will of course be on my Mox field. But for right now, I'm curious what y'all think. How would you brew it differently? What cards would you recommend putting in the 99? I want to take a second to of course thank Wizards of the Coast for allowing me to be part of this wonderful program with such talented individuals. I have a platform once again to share my love of horror with all of you guys. And of course, I want to thank all of you for, well, tuning in, listening, letting me yap about some of my favorite horror flicks and of course some of my favorite horror cards in the set. So please, let me know what you think of Duskmourn. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Until next time, my delightful ghouls and geists, I've been your friendly neighborhood dork for short. Thanks for watching, and take it easy. Stay spooky.